I've had a number of requests to do this band, so here we go. Best known for their early millennium hits like Right Now and Tomorrow, SR-71 always considered themselves to be a rock band in the same vein as Cheap Trick, but they were continually labeled as pop punk, or in some cases lumped in with boy bands, or in other cases the anti-boy band group. Some claim that SR-71 was capitalizing off the success of groups like Blink-182, but they spent a long time trying to nab a major recording contract, only for the frontman to have a new calling later on in his life. Today, let's talk about whatever happened to SR-71. SR-71's hometown would be Baltimore. Frontman and principal songwriter Mitch Allan went to punk shows early in his life. He would play in his first band in high school, he got into another one in college, and started a band that would eventually go through many transformations, eventually becoming SR-71. The birth of SR-71 begins in 1991 when frontman and guitarist Mitch Allan met a bassist named Jeff Reid at a Baltimore club. They were playing in separate bands, but by 1992, their respective outfits came to an end and they decided to join together to form a new band called Honor Among Thieves. From 1992 to 1995, they would go through a number of different guitarists and drummers before settling on their classic lineup. They would enlist guitarist Mark Bokeman in 1994 and drummer Dan Garvin in 95. This was the lineup that made SR-71's first record, but they were still using the moniker Honor Among Thieves. They would take inspiration from acts like the Beatles, Queen, U2, Duran Duran, as well as the Police, in addition to Kiss, Guns N' Roses, and Yes. Allan would be the principal songwriter in the group, mostly penning songs about his own experiences dealing with love and relationships. Honor Among Thieves did get some label attention in the early 90s, but it didn't seem like it was their time yet. They were frequently told that their songs were too dark and they needed to have brighter material. Also, their material was all over the place, with Allan telling the Arizona Republic, "When we first started, we wrote all kinds of songs in all kinds of styles. We were a rock band sometimes, and we were a punk band sometimes." And Allan would admit to the McGill Tribune that one of the showcases they played for a label saw the members have a huge water fight before the show, with the stage having to be covered with rubber mats to prevent the members from slipping on stage. But Allan slipped anyways, landed on his back, and broke his guitar that night. They, of course, didn't get a label deal at the time. Honor Among Thieves would use Washington, D.C. and Baltimore as their home base, and they were a frequent presence at the saloon The Horse You Came In On, a spot that's existed for hundreds of years and was writer Edgar Allan Poe's favorite watering hole. Honor Among Thieves would try to follow Dave Matthews' model of being a touring band and selling boatloads of records on their own, but it didn't really work out that way. They would buy an 11-seater 1986 Dodge van and a trailer, selling their 1996 debut disc Glow after their shows. They managed to sell about 7,000 copies, which was pretty impressive for an independent act. They would play shows along the East Coast, and Allan also had a weekly acoustic show he played in Baltimore. It was over time he'd slowly add members from Honor Among Thieves to his acoustic sets, and it turned into a weekly gig for the band, and they soon started to do gigs at other locations in and around Baltimore, playing up to 5 times a week, but they still weren't getting anywhere. The members during this period of time also worked day jobs, with Allan working as an engineer at a local recording studio he owned, while the other guys were working construction and teaching music. A local musician friend of theirs, drummer John Allan from the group Starseed Speed, he suggested to the band that they send their song to a guy named Andy Martin, who was working for a label at the time called Deep South. They were putting together a compilation series that featured unsigned acts. Deep South had a pretty good track record of discovering bands that major labels wanted to sign, like Marcy Playground and Sister Hazel. The band followed his advice, and the group's track Non-Toxic would be featured and would become the lead single on the Deep 3 compilation. Honor Among Thieves would be invited by Martin to play at the Carolina Music Harvest at the Walnut Creek Amphitheater in October of '98. Dan Garvin would recall to Polestar, "The next thing we know, he's coming up to Baltimore from Raleigh to see us." Martin would eventually come to manage Honor Among Thieves, replacing their old manager, and the band soon set its sights on nabbing a major recording contract. They would also change their name during this time to Radiostar, informing their longtime fans through snail mail and email about the change. Radiostar soon realized that the only way they were going to have success was to get on radio, and that meant that they needed to go to New York City and get a recording contract. But before they could do that, they needed to stop playing shows and start writing some new songs. These songs would form the basis for SR-71's debut album. Radiostar also soon turned their attention to playing New York City, and Reid would tell an Indiana paper, "It was a slow build. We'd go to New York every chance we could, make zero money playing for 20 minutes with 10 other bands and in front of 8 people. Then it would grow to 10 people, 20 people, then it would grow from there." Reid would add in a separate interview with the Daily Herald, "In New York City, if you draw 15 people, you're a big band. We would draw like 50 people, and club owners would say, 'We can't believe you have this kind of following.'" Soon enough, their manager, who had a lot of contacts, lined up showcases with major labels. It was in February of 1999 Radiostar would showcase at the Nashville Extravaganza, and the next month at South by Southwest. They were soon being wined and dined by the major labels and being flown to LA and New York to hear pitches from A&R people. But the band's manager was smart about how he went dealing with the labels. Instead of sitting back and waiting for the offers to come in, they sent in proposals to the interested parties. The band would soon become the subject of a bidding war between 10 major labels, and in March of 1999, they would sign a 2-album deal with RCA. The band's lawyer would inform them it was one of the largest recording deals for an unknown act at the time. The members would receive such a substantial advance that all of them soon quit their day jobs. It was around the time they got signed they once again changed their name to SR-71 because they soon discovered there were 3 other bands who were already using the moniker Radiostar. The name SR-71 was chosen for a few reasons. 3 of the members had dads who served in the Air Force. The SR-71 at the time was the fastest aircraft in history, with Allan's father having worked for the company who designed it. Also, its call sign was Blackbird, a song by the Beatles, Allan's favorite band. SR-71 frequently called themselves a rock band, and Allan would cite their music as being in line with Cheap Trick. Some of their songs like Cheap Trick were super punk, while others were more emotional and down-tempo. The problem was people didn't know how to classify them, and since the press loves labels, they were frequently tagged as pop punk throughout much of their career. I will say there's a lot of comparisons in the press the band got to boy bands, and in some cases the press would refer to them as the anti-boy band group. One guy who would be hugely instrumental in the band's success was RCA's A&R guy, a fellow named David Bendeth. Garvin would tell Polestar, "The thing about David Bendeth that we liked was that he was the only A&R guy that didn't come up and say how great we were. He would tell them, 'You guys are pretty good, here's what sucks, and here's how we can fix it. These are strong centerpiece songs, let's build something around that.'" SR-71 would work with Foo Fighters and Pixies producer Gil Norton on their first album. The band, at the insistence of the record label, opted to hold off on writing more acoustic-based songs. One of the tracks SR-71 wrote after getting signed would be the song Right Now, which their A&R guy actually produced. The rest of the album was done by Gil Norton.
SR-71 would release their debut album Now You See Inside in June of 2000.
The band's breakout hit Right Now would be flagged by the label and their management as being the song that was going to be the centerpiece of the album, and they were right. The pop-punk sounding number would reach number 2 on the rock charts and featured in the trailers for numerous films including the Jason Biggs movie Loser, Old School, Dude Where's My Car, and the video game Splashdown. Allan would explain to the McGill Tribune the song's meaning and the inspiration, revealing, "It's about when you meet a girl and you like her, and she's a great lay and she wants more than just sex out of the relationship and you don't. You end up fighting and arguing all the time about the same thing, but you also don't want to break up with her." He would go on to add the song wasn't super deep, but it's a great track to listen to when you're driving your car real fast. The inspiration for the song wasn't one girl, but rather several girls he dated. The "Miss Right Now" line he would claim was an inside joke between himself and one of the girls he was dating. She would say she wasn't Mrs. Right, and he'd say, "You're Miss Right Now." Meanwhile, all the anger in the song was directed at a different girl he dated, and the band's rapid ascent seemed fitting given that they were named after the world's fastest aircraft. But SR-71 was also taken aback by Right Now's success, as the group thought that it would be used to set up a different song on the record, with bassist Jeff Reid telling an Indiana paper, "We thought it would be a good single to introduce the band, and from there we just build up to the next single. We had no plans on going as high as it did." SR-71 would also nab a spot opening for Bon Jovi, with John being a fan of the group as well. You could be forgiven for believing the band's debut record covered only the topic of sex, but instead it covered a broad spectrum of emotions, with Allan revealing his favorite song off the record was about faith and redemption, and maybe a conspiracy theory too, called Paul McCartney. He would tell an interviewer, "At the time I wrote it, I was having a lot of emotional problems, and the song really helped me come out of that. So it's very dear to me in that way." SR-71 also released another single called Politically Correct. It's a song that seems really appropriate for the times we're living in today. It would peak at number 22 on the alternative charts. Despite the band's success, SR-71 would be accused of being a label plant, or something that was quickly put together to capitalize on the success of pop punk and pop rock acts like Blink-182, Matchbox 20, and Third Eye Blind. Also, like these bands, SR-71 incorporated a number in the name. It probably didn't help the criticism of the group that the same director who did Right Now, Marco Siega, also did Blink-182's All the Small Things. Of course, they also caught some criticism for being bland, boring, and simply uninspiring, and by their own admission, for being good-looking guys. But SR-71 would shoot back, claiming they'd been together for a very long time, and the name was more sentimental, giving a nod to their fathers. Their debut record would end up going gold. Allan would tell the McGill Tribune, "We were actually signed because of the potential of songwriting in the band. The record company thought, this is a band that's going to have a career." The group would return in 2002 with their second album titled Tomorrow. It went in a much darker direction, and the band had been on the road for 18 months on their first record, and Allan was in a pretty dark place mentally. Some of the songs would also be written after 9/11 and would be inspired by the event. The band had actually flown out of Logan Airport in Boston 2 days before 9/11. Allan, during their first world tour, was also dealing with vocal issues, and he was always sick on the road, and the band soon learned their bass player, Jeff Reid, had been diagnosed with lung cancer. He would end up dying in 2004, but he still played on the album. College radio would pick up the songs Hello Hello and My World, and the title track would be the biggest hit off the album, peaking at number 18 on the Modern Rock Tracks chart. SR-71 would also lose their drummer, who joined the group 9 days, and they enlisted longtime friend and former schoolmate of Mitch Allan, that drummer I previously mentioned, John Allan. John Allan had previously played with SR-71, doing some showcases with the group when they were shopping around for record label deals. The album, however, didn't match the commercial success of their debut record. The band soon lost the recording contract with RCA as the label was in turmoil. They underwent massive changes, the president was fired, as were the people he hired, and soon enough, RCA cut its losses, releasing about 90% of the acts on its roster. By the time the group lost the recording contract, they were half done writing their third album, and by this point their bass player had passed away, and their guitarist Mark Buchanan left the band for personal reasons. And Mitch Allan and new drummer John Allan would work together to buy some gear and finish the album themselves, self-financing it. They would send the finished product to their manager, who loved what he heard, but the group's third record would be their final album, and it would be only released in Japan and titled Here We Go Again. One of the songs on their third record was titled 1985, but they didn't really think it fit the group. So while it appeared on the third album, they soon offered it up to a different band, Bowling for Soup, who retooled it a bit and released it on their 2004 album. And you can hear SR-71's version on YouTube. Personally, I like Bowling for Soup's version better. 1985 would be a massive hit for Bowling for Soup, resulting in their 2004 record, The Hangover You Don't Deserve, going gold, and the song would become a top 5 hit. Mitch Allan would soon realize that with the success of 1985, he wanted to continue being a behind-the-scenes songwriter and producer. He's since worked with huge pop stars like Demi Lovato, Kelly Clarkson, Selena Gomez, Backstreet Boys, and he's worked with rock acts too, like Scott Stapp, Daughtry, and Simple Plan. The band has, however, reunited several times since their third album, once in 2009 for the Wicker Park Bucktown Arts and Music Festival in Chicago, doing a full set and then doing another show in their hometown of Baltimore. It was in 2010 the band's third record was finally made available in America as a digital download. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, if you have suggestions for future topics, use the link in the description box below, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.